Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be interviewing Very Worshipful Brother Zane McCune on membership, retention, and engagement.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual suite of hosts, Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth and myself from the Grand Lodge of Washington, and Worshipful Brothers Jared Dunham and Stephen Chung from the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. And we have with us one of our most frequent guests, Very Worshipful Brother Zane McCune, who's here in Washington also, and is involved with the Grand Lodge and does some presentations on membership and engagement and retention, which is why we're talking about it with him. So I guess I know how I would define some of these terms, but Zane, do you have a way that you prefer to define these different words that we're discussing today?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, and thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be back. It's always great hanging out with you guys for the evening and talking about Freemasonry. I hear I teach several classes in Washington's jurisdiction, their lodge leadership retreat, and I hear the word membership and retention, and you hear these buzzwords and kind of what do they mean? And I hear the frequently said, we have a membership problem, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit tonight. But I think of membership in terms of just nothing simply than having somebody join the lodge. They are a new member. That function of them finding your lodge and getting to know you guys and submitting a petition and going through the degrees.
So sort of
he's becoming a new member. Yeah, whether he's around a year from now or not, I don't really view that as a membership issue, because the membership is the function of somebody joining the lodge. Whether he's around a year from now is a retention issue, and what's the experience that he finds himself in with the lodge during that last course of that year. So somebody can be very excited about joining, and they join the lodge, and then in a year from now, they're gone. Does the lodge have a membership problem or a retention problem? That's why I like to split the difference between the two. So membership is just that front end piece of how do you attract members, and do you get to know them, and the process of in our state we have a 6 steps, so we get to know the candidates before they join, but really, what defines a lodge and what defines their success isn't how much of that they can do. It's, can they retain these brothers who join the lodge? And so that I think of as the retention of members.
And you might get into this, and so I don't mean to jumpstart here, but while we have the 6 steps program, hopefully lodges are using it well, and whatever version of it they might be using, which we borrowed generously from our friends to the north. Thank you, Jared and Stephen. Even though the 6 steps, there's still lodges that say, hey, we got a petition, let's get him in that 6 steps program. And I just bow my head in sorrow that it's a pre-petition process. It's really letting the guys get to know, and for the Masons to get to know the candidate, and the candidate or the inquirer to get to know the lodge and the Masons. And Zane, you do a good job, even better than us, that trying to get them out to explore other lodges to make sure that they are a good fit for that culture. And so while, yes, I think our conversation is going to go towards after they're a member and the retention process, are we doing a good job of setting the table, setting the plate, whatever you want to call it, the scene, so that should they have come in to begin with? Maybe that's a bigger question. I don't know.
Yeah.
how can we? If I had to go through it, I may not be a Mason.
At least in our lodge, what we're trying to accomplish during the 6 steps program is several things, but just to name a few, are they really kind of fit to be a Mason, and are they a fit for our lodge? And that's not an exclusivity thing. That's we're very upfront about the culture of our lodge. Here's what we focus on. Here's what we do. Do these align with what you're looking for in a lodge? And what do you bring to a lodge? What are your interests and what are you hoping to get out of it? And those are questions that most lodges that I find don't really ask. They go, oh, you live 5 miles from our house? Oh, well, then you're the perfect candidate for our lodge. Well, they also happen to live 5 or 6 miles from lots of different lodges. So we try to be upfront about kind of who we are, and then share with that potential candidate the other lodges in the immediate area, and a little bit about what we know about those lodges. And our goal is to find a good fit. And it may not be our lodge.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Zane. Actually, it may not be the lodge that he's actually approached. I have actually turned prospects onto other lodges. One, because to him it was really important that he joined the lodge that his grandfather belonged to, which happened to be the other lodge in Kelowna, but he didn't know there was the two lodges, right? And
yeah.
So and then of course there's a lodge in Vernon where the membership of that lodge, they belong to gun clubs, and they go do a lot of shooting and hunting and those types of things. And so there was a fellow that wanted to join, actually lived halfway in between, and I recommended he join the other lodge because after going for a couple of coffees with him and having that initial conversation with him, that's how I found out all of these things about him, that he would probably be a better fit. Now, I've also told guys straight up, like, you may join our lodge because we've connected. You reached out, we've connected. But it's very important that you go and you visit other lodges so that you get to meet the membership from up and down the jurisdiction. And in our district, there's 8 lodges. So you may find that you connect with one guy here, another guy there, right? And that's okay, right? Because we're all spread everywhere, and that just encourages more visitations, right?
Well, I agree with you. That's why we're upfront about who we are as a lodge, because if we all win when that candidate finds the lodge that has a culture and provides an experience that they're interested in. And when you find that right home for them, they're, the difference between what their expectations are and what the reality that what that lodge can provide is really similar. They're going to be happy, and we all win. Guys leave the lodge when they think they're joining one thing and they find out it's something else. They get disenfranchised with Freemasonry, and then they leave the whole thing. They don't generally go join another lodge. And so we all win when we find the right lodge for somebody, and we all lose if we don't do that.
So how do you make sure that they have the similar experience too? That was something else I was contemplating recently, that I want, if even within your own lodge, if I'm kind of the main Westgate guy, the Inquirer, because I manage the website stuff, but if I'm end up being the kind of the main guy that they talk to, then I turn him over to another guy and he talks to them about some things. How do I know, other than just the culture of the lodge and hopefully some good training or some good messaging, how do I know for sure that he's getting the same message? Or the other side of it, what if we have what we would call, that's coming off the website or coming off the street, is kind of the non-traditional approach. What we would, in the part of the 6 steps, it talks about that, the non-traditional approach, where you don't know anybody, you're just coming in as a new inquiry, you have no clue who at the lodge, you have no friends or no connections. Where what we say the traditional approach is someone maybe from work or a family member or somebody associate that or a friend that is a Mason, and they bring them in recommended or well recommended in theory to the lodge. And maybe that's a whole other. I just had that idea that.
I think you got a future show there, Dave.
we should talk about. We should talk about if I recommend them, should you recommend them automatically because I do? That's all on topic. I'll write that down.
Yeah.
But how do I know that person coming off the street, even though they're known, is going to have or has had the same experience that the guy that comes off the internet or off the whatever, a similar 6 steps induction to understand truly what masonry is? Yeah, I know Zane and he seems like a good guy. I work with him. And I think I know what masonry is because I know who Zane is. And you say, yeah, I know John. I know Dave. He's a great guy. And our family is friends. My litmus test, I say to people, is that if my wife and kids were broken down on the side of the road, could I call Jared and would I trust him enough to come and take care of my family? That's one of my litmus tests for the trusting factor of a new inquirer. And so if that's all it was, then that's a different standard than having them come through 6 steps. I say that's my line. Could be 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. There's not a time limit. It's the process of getting through it. And are they actually going through it?
That litmus test makes one big assumption that every single lodge experience is exactly the same. And it's really just, is he somebody who would be a good Mason?
Yes.
But that's, of course, there's more than that. And I guess in our lodge, I'm the primary contact for inbound inquiries. And I would say I would answer it this, 2 ways. One is during our 6 steps, there are certain events and functions that our lodge conducts that we invite those guys to. And so there's a formal dinner, there are social dinners, there's other kind of guys' nights out that we do. And I want to make sure that those candidates are hitting all of those types of events. So it's not just they only come to the lodge dinner or they only go, to the casual night out that we're doing. And then the other way I'd answer that question is, in our lodge, we talk about what do we value and we talk about our lodge culture. And I know that sounds strange, like, well, it's sort of this, organic thing that should just be, it is what it is, and no one can really control it. But I'd argue just the opposite. What do we prioritize?
Talk about your culture.
We talk about what we value in our lodge. What do we want to spend time doing? Nothing. It doesn't really happen by, random series of get-togethers, and we talk about whatever is on the top of our mind. We talk about what we value, what we want our lodge meetings to be like. I'm not saying that if you asked every guy in our lodge, how would you define Verity 59? Then of course they'd all have, their own, answer from their own perspective. But, if you said, what are the top, what's the top thing that you guys value in your lodge and focus on, what would that be? I'd be shocked if that wasn't a pretty consistent answer.
And so does the lodge have a mission statement? Do they have particular goals for planning and things that they do that help to solidify the message and the process? Is that, I know you have some people say there are no standing rules, but you have standing rules that help to define some of that, don't you?
Yeah, we have some standing rules that help prioritize that. And I guess, from our standpoint, Masonic education, esoteric discussion, historical discussion, and we'll engage in, philosophical discussion. When we're at the lodge, we're focusing on our, what does our ritual mean? Why do we, we hear these words and we say these things, but what do they mean and how do we interpret them? That's a different evening for a Mason than, getting together and having a social night down at the lodge, where it's really just get together and talk about, top of mind, maybe the last Seahawks game, or, whatever, is, the topic du jour. I would argue that it's the former that probably what most guys are joining Freemasonry, what they think they are joining when they join Freemasonry, are really looking for. Even if they can't vocalize it, we're there to say, this is what we do. If this is interesting, then we're the lodge that you want to join. If this is not interesting to you, we'll find you another lodge, well, that's okay. Does that help answer that question, or?
I think so. And matter of fact, the idea of joining another lodge, or whether they're already in, or you touched on the idea that when a guy comes in and becomes a Mason and then he says, "Oh, this is what I thought it was," instead of the possibility of experiencing another lodge even after that point, the normal process is they just disappear and they go NPD, not non-payment of dues. And so they're kind of gone from Masonry, even though they're technically still a Mason.
Yeah, still a Mason.
You can't undo that.
Yeah.
But that he may decide not to. We were talking in the blue room, we call it the green room before our show, that the word demit isn't 4 letters. It's not a 4-letter word. And so the idea that a guy can't come in and be a Mason, and great Mason, good or bad, whatever. Maybe he has a bad experience, maybe there's a bad situation, whatever. Or he moves, God forbid he moves to another area. We expect him to drive an hour and a half. Sorry, Jared, I think you guys already do that. Drive an hour and a half to your lodge. And when it used to be 10 minutes down the street, how can you expect people to do that? Or their job changes, their shift changes or whatever. So to be able to demit and move to a more satisfying situation should be a no-brainer. But I think we look at the word demit and, oh, why are you leaving lodge? Well, I'm not. I'm just making it better. We talk about the important things in life. We say Freemasonry is about faith, family, finances, and then fraternity, but we seem to ignore those elements when it comes right down to it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because really the people that are disenfranchised with a fraternity rarely demit. They just walk away.
Just leave.
They walk back out the west gate the way they came, and that's the end. And you don't really know why.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part. And actually it brings up a topic that I've been it brings up a myth that I've been trying to bust for probably the last 5 or 6 years while teaching classes at Lodge Leadership. And the question that I always ask the class at the beginning is, it's a true or false question. And it's, we have a membership problem, true or false. And, of course, how many people think it's true? How many people think it's false? And more than not, guys will say that's true. We have a membership problem. And they sort of define it as either we can't attract guys to the lodge. We need to do more in the community. We need to do more advertising. We need to do they don't know who we are. So they think that's what's happening because they see the numbers declining, right? Well, the numbers declining, clearly people don't know who we are. Then they make that connection. The other myth that they associate, or the reason they associate with that myth is our brothers who pass away and go to the Celestial Lodge. That's another one of those reasons they attribute to the decline in our rank, in our role. And when you actually get into the membership statistics, which you can in Washington, and I have, you could say that was probably true up until about the year 2000, that the number of deaths from Masons exceeded the number of new guys joining the lodge. So even, it was a declining number no matter what. And that was probably true up until the year about the year 2000. Something interesting shifts right around that time. And it's because we've gone through that generation. I mean, this is just sort of generational statistics. The number of people who are continuing to pass away to the Celestial Lodge eventually is starting to decline because there's fewer of them. So that rate of death is not constant after the year 2000 like it was before the year 2000. What's taking its place are NPDs and demits. And there are more NPDs and demits now than there are brothers that are passing away to the Celestial Lodge. So now when you really break apart the numbers and you look post year 2000, you'll see that the reason that we're really still declining it's less dependent on guys passing away and much more dependent on guys leaving the lodge. And that's what's declining. That's what's contributing to the decline at the state level. Now, every lodge is going to experience something a little bit different. You can track your own lodge, and we could hypothetically track every single lodge, but all these membership statistics are available at the Grand Lodge level every year.
I've done the same thing here in British Columbia. I actually went through our membership numbers, and the year 1963 for us was the year that we peaked.
Okay.
From 1963 until today, we have had our membership has been declining steadily.
Yeah.
But another question I have was, you've gone over your statistics down in Washington State. One of the things, and this might be slightly anecdotal, that I notice up here is that our lodges in our annual returns, whenever they show the membership, they show membership, how many membership cards we've actually handed out. But up here, I know quite a few members that are members of all the lodges in my district. And so all of a sudden we've got an inflated, and then a lot of what happens is they retire, they join all the lodges, and then a few years later, they suddenly realize how much they're spending on lodge dues, and they start demitting from all but their mother lodge. And we all of a sudden we have this big, and I don't know about big, but have you noticed in your numbers down there anything similar to that, where it looks like we're losing members, but we're actually just losing memberships, not actually members?
It's hard to see in the Grand Lodge numbers. I know from my lodge, because I'm the secretary, so I see. It's a really great question, Jared. Not really. We had a handful of plural members. I would say of all of the demits that we've had in the past, just say 10 years, I would say 5 really were contributed to guys that were in multiple lodges, and they just said, hey, I'm just gonna demit from everything back to my my mother lodge. So it really hasn't inflated our lodge numbers all that much, and it's hard to dissect that out of the Grand Lodge numbers.
Because I know that was the issue with my previous lodge, that we eventually went dark because of our active members, all but 3 of them were members of other lodges. So when you tried to get anyone to do anything, they're like, well, I can't, I'm already doing something, and so I was just wondering if that was an issue down in Washington State as well.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Instead of the butterfly effect, it's the belly button effect. How many belly buttons are there really?
Right.
When I was a newer Mason, I was so impressed. A guy would stand up and he would be introduced several times. I'm the senior deacon over here, and I'm the junior warden over there, and I'm the musician over there, whatever. He was a member of all these other lodges and doing all these things. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's amazing. How can he? He must be so wonderful. 2 things I realized: one, he's so busy, he has no life. He may be retired, but 2, more importantly, I thought, in some way, well, actually there's 3 points. In some way, he's holding a lodge open that shouldn't be. They're just propping them up. And if he's not propping up a lodge, if the lodge is running successfully, then he's probably taking a position from somebody that really should have that position. Is he taking an opportunity from a newer Mason or from somebody else? Now, maybe he's doing the right thing and filling in. A lot of us have done that. You got to fill in. There's a gap. Something happens. Somebody does move away to that city. It's an hour and a half away. A gap opens. You need to fill it as a good past master. I think that's the role, but maybe that's the case. And particularly when
it's hard to know how to walk that line between, keeping a lodge open that should just go ahead and allow it to fail. Let the brothers find other lodges and move on, rather than, propping up a lodge that, that doesn't need to have happen. Hard to know. How are we doing on time? I there was a couple of things I wanted to share, and I don't know if there's an opportunity for another meeting, but I'll give you just maybe Dave, I'll ask, I'll open it up to, all of you guys, but sorry, go ahead. Matt, you're trying to.
Oh yeah, well, I was just going to say, Zane, are you willing to? Can you hang around for another episode? We can.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay, well, so I feel like we talked a lot about the problem, but yeah, I know you have some how shall we say, more disciplined thoughts than our recently conversation that we just had, and some supporting documents and such. So, and we definitely want to get to that, and we don't have enough time at the moment. So, I guess what I'm going to say is thank you for coming, Zane, and on behalf of David and Jared and Stephen and myself, we thank you all for listening to our humble podcast, and please tune in for part 2 of our conversation with Zane McCune here in a little bit, that we will be releasing. We'll just continue to discuss membership, retention, and engagement, which I don't even think we got around to engagement, but anyway, we'll talk about it next time on the Working Tools podcast. Good night.